So it's an exciting day today. Slackware 14.2 has been released. Um, so figured I'd make a video. This is twofold. One, this is the first time I'm messing with it. Since it's been released, it's only, 8 or 10 hours old. But also need to set up a virtual machine for myself to run some testing, just some validation on things, make sure everything works. It should, but before I move it to some real hardware, I want to test in a virtual environment. So let's fire up VirtualBox, and I could be using QEMU KVM combination, but I like VirtualBox to have a consistent virtualization environment on Windows, Linux, and Solaris. So I do like that, and we'll give it 4 gigs of memory, and we'll do a dynamically allocated drive, 28 gigs. Should be enough. Now we got to tweak some settings. Give it 4 CPUs just for extra oomph, although we don't need it. Slackware is pretty good in that it, at least in previous versions, it still could exist nicely on lighter weight hardware. Some of the other Linuxes had a higher system requirement. You probably couldn't get by with an old 486 and 8 megs of memory, but maybe. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's tried it. We're going to want this bridged and Ethernet 1. And last thing is to pick the drive. Or pick the ISO image for the CD drive, I should say. And we'll start it. Now I'm going to go into scale mode so we can get the fonts a little bit larger, or the display a little bit larger. Again, this is inexact, so if things look a little strange, it's because I obviously just dragged to resize this, so the aspect ratio may not be the same as what it would be on a real display, so do bear that in mind. We're booting up here. This is, I believe, a 4.4 series kernel, so certainly some big advance since the last release. And so far the installer looks the same. And we'll go and partition things. So this is new, right? So let me get out of here and so we are 2.27 on CF disk. Let me look at my my other machine here really quick and see what the previous version was. We'll not do that. We'll do it this way so you can see. Okay, so we're 2.21.2. So some movement here on CF disk, but enough of that. Let's just create some partitions. This is nice because it lets you choose your label type. We're going to want GPT, so that is nice. But also you could do old style DOS F disk or Sun. I think there was another option there. Get some swap space and the rest for root. Change that to swap. I like the new CF disk. I like the interface improvements. Gives you your UUIDs, partition types. Very nice. Really like this improvement in the interface here. So presumably everything stays the same with using setup to install. We'll go through the steps here. Add swap, And here's our root drive. A quick format. It looks like the file systems are the same. So extended 2, 3, and 4, JFS, Riser, if anyone still uses Riser, I don't know. B-tree, again, if anyone uses B-tree, and XFS. Uh, for lack of trying to mess around with anything, we'll stick with the safe choice of extended 4, which is what I like to use for root and file systems. Things that can't fail, it's really stable. My data file systems tend to be either JFS or XFS on the Linux side, and obviously, ZFS for the Solaris and FreeBSD side, or UFS. So I am going to run through this installer pretty quickly now because I don't really see any changes here. Things look pretty much the same. So I'm going to run through this pretty quick. Obviously, we're not going to pay attention to the package install, where it runs through the actual data transfer. And if I detect any big differences, I will call them out. But otherwise, everything 14.2 here looks the same as 14.1, which looked the same as previous versions. So this is going to do its copying, and we'll come back to this when it is when the actual data copy is complete. So we're back now after the data has been copied down to my new root drive. Going to skip USB stick, not much point here. Do the simple. I love that they're still using Lilo. That's probably not going to be true for UEFI. You'll need, eLilo or whatever is used there. To be honest, I use the legacy boot on my actual hardware that's running Slackware, just because it's easier. My laptops that are UEFI, obviously we have to use UEFI, so standard, don't need to pass anything. One thing I am excited about for this new kernel is it should have drivers for my 2-port serial board, which currently I'm having to run a patched kernel, so we'll actually get a mainstream kernel. And we don't want UTF-8, it's not important. Yeah, MBR. And no GPM. This is what's great about Slackware, is if you did want GPM, I mean, it harkens back to the 90s to have that kind of text mode mouse at your console. And again, for this purpose, it isn't very handy, but there are cases where GPM comes in really handy. Yeah. And we'll give it a static IP. Default net mask, gateway, and so that looks good. So network configuration remains the same. The startup services screen remains the same. Again, I didn't expect a lot of differences in the installer. It is nice we got an updated version of CFdisk. That probably means we also have updated versions of FDisk if any changes were made, and parted. I like CFdisk. I find it really rapid. FDisk also works great. I've only actually used parted occasionally, and that has typically been on the Red Hat side of things. So for here, I will accept, let's start the web server just for fun, and cups. And no screen fonts, local time, US Central. So that may have been a different screen. I don't remember, but the time zone selection was easier. And we'll do XFCE. We probably won't start a desktop, just because, again, the looking at various desktops doesn't have a whole lot of benefit for me. I typically do an old style window manager, something like TWM or MWM. And those will run everywhere, right? So basically any Unix or Unix-like platform, TWM and MWM will run. And obviously some of the other stuff like OpenLook won't, but that's just the nature of it being a 64-bit system. And so we got root set, and we will reboot. So Lilo back to the same logo that we had before. 2-minute standard delay. Boot up time seems identical. Uh, so maybe even a little faster, since that had to generate our keys. So let's start taking a look at some of the included software. We'll start with a couple utilities. See, top looks and runs the same. So we're 331. Let's see what. So bumped a version on top. Pretty good. Let's see what do I really care about. Obviously Perl. So we are Perl 522.2 versus 518. So that's a big jump, and that's pretty important. GCC 5.3. So again, we're now into the 5 series versus 4.2.8. So that's another really important jump in version. Oh, forgetting the most important part. The kernel, 4414. So again, another major boost in major version increase versus the 310. So I know there's a lot of new device support in the 4 series. Kernels, I don't actually have a list. One of the things I do care about, and this is what I took some of the code from, was for my dual port serial card, which was not supported under the 3 series, but is under the 4, or at least not the 310. So that will be good. So that's one of the reasons I'm eager to upgrade. Let's see. So it doesn't look like there's CramFS. I'm not familiar with that. So I don't know. Doesn't look like there's anything too major in the new file systems to be made. Let me just switch over back to my old machine. Yes, that also had CramFS, so obviously nothing new there. Take a look at Klang. It's 380. Versus 3.3. So just a minor increase on for Klang. Let's see what other useful things that I actually care about that have changed. So we can also take a look at the versions of packages here. So let's take a look at Xorg is 171. Nothing under X there. Let's take a look at KDE. We're 4.14.3 KDE. What were we before? I don't typically run KDE anymore. I used to be a big KDE fan, but not as much anymore. Yeah, so just a minor version increase in KDE. Take a look at XFCE. We're 412 here. And what were we over here? 4.8. So, or 410. So another minor increase in XFCE. How about Ruby? Ruby is 225 versus 193. So that's another big improvement that we're now into the major version 2 on Ruby. That's kind of critical. To be honest, the 1.9 was a bit dated. Although one of the things I do point out with the Perl version, Ruby version, these things, and maybe we'll touch on this in a later video. I know there was a request to look at R, and these languages that you use, it is best, especially these, the sort of interpreted or dynamic languages, don't use the system installed version, right? So some package somewhere, incredibly less likely on Slackware, but if you're on a RPM based system, something that does auto updates, some update can mess with your installation there, right? It's unlikely, but I have seen it happen. So the way to do it is build your own, put it somewhere else, and use its own package management. So Ruby gems, or CPAN with Perl, or CRAN with R, to manage its own sub modules, right? So its own libraries. That is a much safer approach for doing things. So in a real production environment, I'd have my own Ruby installed somewhere, my own Perl installed somewhere. If I was going to do Python, same with Python, right? Rather than using the system available ones. That being said, for a development machine, probably doesn't make too much of a difference. And then for Perl, there's a nice utility called Perl Brew that lets you have multiple versions quickly accessed. So I don't know what else we can really look at here in terms of versions. I did mention Python, so let's see what the difference in Python version is. We were 2.7.11. 2.7.5. Again, not big into Python. Take a look at some other utilities and see what the output here is. We do get colored demessage, which is, I think, fantastic. So we can turn that off, yeah. So some of the core utilities have been updated. Well, that's about it. Probably wrap up this video now. Don't want it to be too long. Maybe we'll go in more in depth if there's a user request for it. If some viewer or viewers want to request a more in-depth look at the Slackware 14.2, but I don't know if that necessarily is needed. Look at my previous video for Slackware and some of the others on the topic that go into more in depth into some of the particulars. This video is really just a kind of an overview of the update. All right, so what has changed that really I care about, which is Perl, C compilers, and Fortran compilers, and then some of the basic utilities. We went through the installer just to see if anything differed there, and that's, with the exception of things like the partitioning tool, CFDisk, getting a bump, but it's really kernel and compilers and some of the dynamic languages that I care about have changed. It looks like Xorg is bumped up a little bit too, but so far so good. I'm going to continue testing this release, and I'm probably going to be putting it on my main server probably within the week. I may want to pick up a brand new SSD for my root file system. Um, Currently only on spinning disk, but I probably should get some more storage there because storage is getting a little bit tight uh, on this machine. So I will leave this video here. Uh, do please leave a comment if there's anything you'd like to see about Slackware in future videos. Thanks.